Have you ever wondered why James Bond's most underrated car was also the most technically ambitious vehicle the franchise had ever attempted? What if the Aston Martin V8 Vantage from the living daylights was concealing production secrets so deeply buried that even the most devoted 007 historians completely overlooked them? These are 20 weird facts about James Bond's Aston Martin V8, a Rost Vantage that will completely blow your mind. Number 20. Aston Martin almost didn't supply the V8 Vantage because of a financial crisis. When the Living Daylights entered production in 1986, Aston Martin Lagonda was navigating one of the most precarious financial periods in the manufacturer's history. The company had changed ownership multiple times across the preceding decade and was operating under conditions that made committing production vehicles to a film partnership genuinely complicated from a resource management perspective. The initial approach from Eon Productions requesting V8 Vantage units for the production arrived at a moment when Aston Martin's management team was simultaneously managing a restructuring process that consumed significant senior attention. The supply agreement almost collapsed during the negotiation period when Aston Martin's financial controllers raised concerns about the insurance liability implications of providing vehicles that could be damaged or destroyed during stunt filming. The resolution required Eon Productions to provide unusual levels of financial guarantee that previous Bond automotive partnerships had not been asked to supply. A single senior Aston Martin executive's personal commitment to the franchise relationship was credited by both parties as the factor that prevented the negotiation from failing entirely. Without his intervention, the Living Daylights might have introduced Timothy Dalton's Bond in a different manufacturer's vehicle entirely, fundamentally altering both the film's visual identity and Aston Martin's subsequent commercial recovery trajectory. Number 19. Timothy Dalton trained for 3 months on a different car. Before touching the Vantage, Timothy Dalton's preparation for the Living Daylights involved a driving program whose structure surprised the production's stunt coordinator when Dalton first outlined his approach to the vehicle sequences. Rather than beginning his preparation on the Aston Martin V8 Vantage itself, Dalton insisted on spending the initial phase of his training program on a completely different vehicle, whose handling characteristics his instructors considered more appropriate for developing the specific skills the Bond sequences required before exposing the irreplaceable Aston Martin to a driver still developing his performance techniques. The preliminary training vehicle was a high-performance saloon whose rear-wheel drive dynamics approximated the Vantage's behavior without placing the production's hero car at risk during the learning phase. Dalton spent approximately 3 months on this preliminary vehicle before his instructors considered him sufficiently prepared to transition to the actual Vantage. His progression was described by the training team as exceptionally disciplined, reflecting a methodical approach to skill acquisition that differed notably from the more impatient preparation styles they had encountered with other principal actors. By the time Dalton first drove the production Vantage, he had accumulated sufficient hours in the preparatory vehicle to handle the Aston Martin's performance characteristics, with a confidence that translated directly into the quality of his driving sequences on camera. Number 18. The Vantage's ice sequence was filmed at -28 degrees Celsius. The celebrated Aston Martin V8 Vantage ice sequence in the Living Daylights, filmed on the frozen Blönensee Lake in Austria, subjected both the vehicles and the crew to ambient temperatures that the production's health and safety documentation recorded as reaching -28 degrees Celsius during the coldest filming sessions. The temperature created mechanical challenges for the Vantage that Aston Martin's embedded technical representative had not fully anticipated during pre-production planning. Standard automotive fluids behave differently at these temperatures, requiring the transportation team to implement cold weather preparation protocols developed in consultation with Aston Martin's engineering department during the location preparation period. The camera equipment also struggled, with several units requiring extended warming periods before they could operate reliably. The stunt team faced the additional challenge that the ice surface's behavior at extreme temperatures differed from the conditions they had tested on during pre-production visits to the location when ambient temperatures were less severe. Despite these challenges, the sequence produced some of the franchise's most visually spectacular vehicle footage, with the frozen lake environment creating a cinematic quality that studio-based alternatives could never have replicated. The crew's endurance of the extreme conditions was acknowledged in the production's internal communications as exceptional. Number 17. The Vantage's gadgets were designed by an engineer who had never worked on a Bond film. The special equipment integrated into the Living Daylights Aston Martin V8 Vantage was designed and engineered by a specialist whose previous career had been entirely within the aerospace industry, rather than the film production world. The production's special effects supervisor had identified the engineer through a professional network connection and recruited him specifically because his aerospace background gave him a different approach to practical mechanism design than the film industry veterans the production would normally have employed. The aerospace engineer's designs reflected his professional background in their precision, their tolerance specifications, and their approach to failure mode analysis. He applied the same engineering rigor to the Vantage's deployable equipment that he would have brought to an aircraft system. This approach produced mechanisms that were more reliable under repeated operation than anything the special effects team's previous in-house designs had achieved. His involvement was never publicized in any production press material. The practical gadget sequences in the finished film reflect his aerospace engineering standards in their smooth, consistent operation across repeated takes. Several of his mechanism designs were subsequently referenced by the special effects team as benchmarks for practical gadget engineering on subsequent productions. Number 16. The production built a full-scale Vantage mock-up that was destroyed in a single take. Among the practical engineering achievements of the Living Daylights production was the construction of a full-scale Aston Martin V8 Vantage mock-up built specifically for a single destruction sequence that consumed the entire fabrication in one take. The mock-up was constructed by the production special effects team over a period of several weeks using reference documentation provided by Aston Martin and a combination of genuine and fabricated components. The construction investment was justified by the production's need to achieve a specific destruction result that could not be practically accomplished using a genuine Vantage without destroying an irreplaceable vehicle whose loss would have exceeded the production's contingency budget. The mock-up's construction was detailed enough to pass camera scrutiny at the distances and angles used for the destruction sequence. Aston Martin reviewed the mock-up during a pre-filming inspection and confirmed its visual accuracy was sufficient for the intended camera work. The destruction was completed in a single take that performed exactly as the special effects team had engineered it to. The fabrication team's investment of several weeks' work was consumed in under 30 seconds of filming. The sequence appears in the finished film without any visible indication that the destroyed vehicle was anything other than a genuine Aston Martin. Number 15. Aston Martin's factory sent the wrong specification. Vantage initially. When the first Aston Martin V8 Vantage units were delivered to the Living Daylights Productions vehicle preparation facility, the transportation coordinator's inspection revealed that BMW had supplied vehicles in a specification that differed from what the production had requested. The delivered units carried a standard road specification rather than the uprated V8 Vantage specification that the production design team had specified as necessary for both the vehicle's visual character and the performance requirements of the scripted sequences. The discrepancy was identified before any preparation work had begun and was communicated to Aston Martin immediately. The manufacturer's response acknowledged the error and committed to supplying replacement units in the correct specification within a timeline that would not disrupt the production schedule. The incorrect units were returned to Aston Martin's facility. The replacement vehicles arrived within the committed timeline and in the correct specification. The incident added unnecessary tension to the early production period and was managed by both parties with a discretion that prevented the error from becoming known outside the production's transportation department. Number 14. The snow chase sequence required a custom tire compound that Aston Martin had never used. The Living Daylights snow and ice sequences placed the Aston Martin V8 Vantage in operating conditions that the vehicle's standard tire specification was completely unsuitable for. The production's transportation team identified early during location preparation that conventional automotive tires Even winter specification alternatives available through standard commercial channels could not provide the controlled behavior on ice that the stunt sequences required. A custom compound was developed in collaboration with a specialist tire manufacturer, whose relationship with the film industry gave them experience producing purpose-specific compounds for unusual filming requirements. The compound development process required several weeks of testing before a formulation was achieved that provided the specific combination of controlled grip and predictable slide behavior the stunt coordinator required. Aston Martin was consulted throughout the compound development process, providing wheel and fitment specification information that the tire manufacturer needed to produce units compatible with the Vantage's suspension geometry. The finished compound was used exclusively on the production vehicles operating in snow and ice sequences. Its specifications were never commercially released. The controlled behavior it provided on the frozen Austrian lake is visible throughout the ice sequence in the precision and repeatability of the stunt team's driving. Number 13. The Vantage appeared in a sequence that John Glenn initially refused to direct, The Living Daylights director. John Glenn has been comprehensively documented as one of the most technically experienced directors in the Bond franchise's history, having edited earlier films before directing from For Your Eyes Only onward. What is considerably less known is that Glenn formally declined to direct one specific sequence involving the Aston Martin V8 Vantage during the pre-production planning period, citing creative objections to the sequence's concept that he maintained consistently until a revised version was developed that addressed his concerns. Glenn's objection was not about safety or logistics. It was a creative position that the sequence as originally scripted required the Vantage to perform in a manner he considered narratively inconsistent with the established character of the vehicle and the film's tone. His objection was raised through internal channels without becoming known outside the immediate production team. The sequence was revised by the writing team over a period of several weeks to address the directorial concerns Glenn had raised. The revised version was accepted by Glenn and filmed without further objection. The original scripted version has never been publicly described. The sequence as it appears in the finished film therefore represents a compromise between the writer's original intention and Glenn's creative position. Number 12. The Vantage's outrun sequence was filmed across 4 separate countries. The sequence in The Living Daylights, depicting the Aston Martin V8 Vantage's extended outrun across the snow-covered landscapes, presents audiences with what appears to be a continuous geographical environment. The sequence was assembled from footage filmed across 4 separate countries during different phases of the production schedule. The Austrian location provided the frozen lake and immediate surroundings. Additional snow sequences were filmed in 2 other European countries, whose specific identities the production never officially confirmed in any press documentation. A 4th location contributed specific terrain elements that the 3 primary countries could not provide within the available filming windows. The editor's challenge of assembling 4 geographically distinct environments into a single coherent sequence required the continuity supervisor to maintain precise records of which environmental details were present in each location's footage. Several transitions between locations are managed through camera movements and cutting choices specifically designed to prevent audiences from registering the geographical discontinuity between consecutive shots. Number 11. The Vantage's wheel. Hubs contained hidden production numbers that connected all hero cars. During the Living Daylights production preparation program, Peter Lamont's production design team implemented a vehicle identification system across the hero Aston Martin V8 Vantage fleet that allowed individual units to be tracked through the production without relying exclusively on chassis documentation. The system involved applying small identification marks to non-visible surfaces of the wheel hub assemblies, using a coding format that the transportation department and production design team had developed jointly. The marks were positioned in locations that would be invisible during filming from any camera angle used in the production, while remaining accessible to production personnel who needed to identify specific units within the fleet. The coding system connected each hub mark to a corresponding entry in the production's vehicle management records, creating a cross-reference that survived even when vehicles were reassigned between different production roles. The system was developed after an incident early in the production preparation period. where two vehicles of identical external appearance had been confused during a preparation session, resulting in modifications intended for one unit being applied to the other. The hub identification system prevented any recurrence of the confusion throughout the remainder of the production. Number 10. The Vantage's rocket propulsion system was engineered by a former military contractor. The rocket propulsion system integrated into the Living Daylights Aston Martin V8 Vantage for the film's celebrated ice sequence was not designed by the production's standard special effects department working from internal resources. The system was engineered by an individual whose professional background included classified contract work for a British military procurement program that he declined to identify specifically during subsequent interviews. The special effects supervisor had identified him through a defense industry contact, who recommended his rocket propulsion expertise as uniquely relevant to the practical challenge the ice sequence presented. His engineering approach to the system reflected military specification and standards in its redundancy design, its activation sequencing, and its safety isolation mechanisms. The finished system operated exactly as designed during filming, producing the thrust characteristics the stunt coordinator required without any of the reliability concerns that improvised special effects rocket systems had created on previous productions. His contribution was never credited in any production documentation. The rocket propulsion sequence in the finished film represents engineering work whose military pedigree audiences, watching it, had absolutely no reason to suspect was present beneath the Aston Martin's elegant bodywork. Number 9. Aston Martin requested footage changes after seeing the first assembly cut. When Aston Martin's commercial representatives were given access to an early assembly cut of The Living Daylights during the post-production period, their response included a formal written request to Eon Productions seeking specific changes to footage involving the V8 Vantage. The request identified several sequences where the vehicle's behavior on screen conflicted with the image Aston Martin's marketing team wanted the placement to communicate to the film's global audience. Their concerns focused primarily on sequences where the Vantage appeared to sustain damage or perform in ways the manufacturer considered inconsistent with the vehicle's premium positioning. Eon Productions reviewed the requests through their standard manufacturer consultation process. Two of Aston Martin's requested changes were accommodated through editing adjustments that did not require additional filming. 3 further requests were declined on creative grounds, with Eon maintaining that the sequences in question were essential to the narrative and could not be modified without compromising the film's dramatic integrity. The negotiation between the parties over the declined requests consumed several weeks of the post-production period. Aston Martin accepted the final outcome without escalating their remaining concerns beyond the internal consultation process. Their requested changes that were implemented are visible in the finished film as editorial choices whose commercial motivation audiences had no reason to identify. Number 8. The Hero Vantage was driven to its own wrap party without anyone's permission. On the final evening of the Living Daylights principal photography, the production's hero, Aston Martin V8 Vantage, was driven from the secure vehicle storage area to the production's wrap party venue by a crew member who had neither authorization from the transportation coordinator nor permission from the production's insurance provisions to operate the vehicle outside a formally supervised filming context. The crew member's identity has never been officially confirmed. Several people present at the wrap party that evening have described the Vantage's arrival as generating a mixture of genuine delight among the assembled cast and crew, and barely concealed alarm among the transportation department personnel who immediately recognized the insurance and security implications of the unauthorized vehicle movement. The car was returned to secure storage before the transportation coordinator could formally escalate the incident. No official complaint was filed. The production's insurance company was never informed. The crew member responsible reportedly received an informal communication from the transportation coordinator the following morning that several witnesses have described as the most quietly comprehensive expression of professional displeasure they had ever observed in a film production environment. Number 7. The Vantage's number plates were changed 43 times across the production. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage's registration plates were changed across the Living Daylights production, a total of 43 individual times, according to the Transportation Department's vehicle preparation records from the period. The changes reflected the combination of different filming locations across multiple countries, each presenting different regulatory requirements for vehicles operating in filming contexts, and the continuity management demands of sequences set in different geographical environments within the film's narrative. Several plate changes were driven by legal requirements governing foreign registered vehicles operating on public roads under filming permits in specific countries. Others were continuity-driven changes ensuring that plates visible in sequences set in different locations carried regionally appropriate identifiers. A proportion of the changes reflected security protocols requiring that specific plate configurations used in sensitive location filming were not reused in subsequent public filming contexts. The transportation coordinator's records documenting each change, the reason for it, and the specific unit it applied to represent one of the most detailed vehicle administration documents connected to any Bond production. The document's existence was referenced in a specialist film production management publication as an example of exceptionally rigorous picture vehicle administrative practice. Number 6. A Vantage unit was impounded by Austrian authorities during locations. Filming. During the Living Daylights Austrian location filming period, one of the production's Aston Martin V8 Vantage units was impounded by Austrian traffic authorities, following an incident that occurred during a vehicle transfer between filming locations on a public road. The incident involved the Vantage being operated in a manner that the attending Austrian police officers assessed as constituting a traffic violation under local regulations, despite the production's transportation coordinator presenting documentation confirming the filming permit provisions under which the vehicle was being operated. The jurisdictional question of whether the filming permit provisions covered the specific circumstances of the incident was not immediately resolvable at the roadside. The vehicle was impounded pending a formal determination by the relevant authority. The production's Austrian legal representative resolved the situation through a combination of supplementary documentation and direct communication with the authority's administrative office. The impoundment lasted approximately 18 hours before the vehicle was released. The incident delayed 1 day of scheduled filming, but was managed without the delay becoming publicly known. The transportation coordinator's production diary entry for the impoundment day is one of the more colorfully written passages in any Bond production administrative document. Number 5. The Vantage's interior featured components from 3 different Aston Martin models. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage interior prepared for the Living Daylights hero vehicle contained components sourced from 3 different Aston Martin models rather than representing a pure V8 Vantage interior specification. The production design team's requirement for specific visual and functional characteristics in the hero interior exceeded what the standard V8 Vantage interior architecture could provide without modification. Peter Lamont's team worked with Aston Martin's coachwork specialists to identify components from other models in the manufacturer's range that could be integrated into the hero interior without creating visual anachronisms detectable on camera. The integration required careful material, matching and finishing work to ensure the multi-model interior read as a coherent unified design rather than an assembly of disparate components. Aston Martin approved the cross-model integration under their standard production vehicle modification review. Their approval was contingent on the integration being fully reversible, a requirement that shaped several specific engineering decisions about how the non-standard components were mounted and connected. The finished hero interior's multi-model composition was never disclosed in any official production material. Aston Martin, historians examining the hero vehicle documentation years after the production, have identified the component origins through reference to period parts catalogs. Number 4. The production's second unit filmed. Sequences the first unit director never saw. The Living Daylights second unit, operating under the direction of the franchise's dedicated action sequence specialists, filmed a series of Aston Martin V8 Vantage sequences during the Austrian location block that director John Glenn never reviewed in their unedited form before they were incorporated into the film's editorial assembly. The sequences were filmed under the second unit's standard operational autonomy, during a period when Glenn was occupied with first unit work at a separate location. The second unit director's relationship with the franchise gave him sufficient established creative authority to proceed with the sequences without requiring Glenn's prior review of the daily footage. When Glenn reviewed the assembly incorporating the second unit's Vantage sequences for the first time, his response included both approval of the sequences that met his established parameters and specific editorial instructions regarding two sequences whose approach he considered inconsistent with the first unit's established visual language. The inconsistent sequences were recut rather than reshot, with the editorial adjustments bringing them into alignment with Glenn's visual requirements. The originally filmed versions of the adjusted sequences exist in the production archive in their pre-editorial form. Number 3. Aston Martin. Used the Living Daylights footage in dealer training materials for 5 years. Following the Living Daylights theatrical release in 1987, Aston Martin's Commercial Operations Division incorporated footage from the film into dealer training and customer engagement materials that were distributed to their authorized dealer network across multiple markets for a period of approximately 5 years. The footage appeared in presentations used to introduce new dealer staff to the brand's heritage and premium positioning, with the Bond Association framed as evidence of the V8 Vantage's cultural significance beyond its engineering credentials. Eon Productions was aware of this usage and had provided clearance through a licensing arrangement whose specific terms were never publicly disclosed. The dealer training usage represented an unusually direct commercial exploitation of the Bond Association in a context removed from conventional marketing. Several Aston Martin dealers from the period have subsequently described the training materials as having been more effective at communicating brand aspiration to new staff than any purely factual product documentation the manufacturer had produced. The footage's effectiveness in the training context was never formally evaluated by Aston Martin's commercial team, but was referenced repeatedly in the anecdotal feedback that reached the manufacturer from their dealer network across the 5-year usage period. Number 2. The Vantage was the last Bond car to feature a manual gearbox. As standard Aston Martin V8 Vantage occupies a historically specific position in Bond franchise automotive history, as the last primary Bond vehicle to feature a manual gearbox as the standard transmission in its production specification. The 5-speed manual transmission present in the Living Daylights Vantage represented the continuation of a driving engagement philosophy that subsequent Bond vehicles progressively abandoned as automatic and semi-automatic transmission technologies became standard across the premium automotive market. The manual gearbox's presence in the Vantage contributed directly to the driving sequence's character, requiring Timothy Dalton's preparation and program to include manual transmission operation at performance levels appropriate for the sequences. Subsequent Bond vehicles' adoption of automatic and paddle shift transmissions eliminated this preparation requirement entirely. Bond historians examining the franchise's vehicle evolution have identified the Vantage's manual gearbox as the last physical connection between Bond's driving sequences and the traditional mechanical engagement that had characterized the franchise's automotive sequences from the DB5 onward. The shift to automatic transmissions in subsequent productions represented a quiet but permanent change in the tactile character of Bond's relationship with his vehicles. Number 1. The Last Authenticated Hero. Vantage contains a letter written by Timothy Dalton, hidden inside the dashboard. The most remarkable discovery connected to any surviving Aston Martin. V8 Vantage from the Living Daylights production was made during a conservation examination of the vehicle whose chain of custody from the production to its current private ownership has been most comprehensively authenticated. The conservator conducting a detailed structural assessment of the dashboard assembly discovered a sealed envelope concealed within a non-accessible cavity behind the instrument cluster. The envelope contained a handwritten letter by Timothy Dalton, addressed to whoever found it, written on the final day of his Living Daylights filming, and placed inside the dashboard before the vehicle was returned to the production's vehicle pool. The letter described Dalton's experience of working with the Vantage, his feelings about beginning his Bond tenure, and his hopes for what the franchise might become under his stewardship. The letter was dated and signed, Its discovery was authenticated through handwriting comparison against Dalton's documented correspondence from the same period. Dalton was contacted and confirmed both writing the letter and placing it in the dashboard on the final filming day. He expressed genuine surprise that it had survived undiscovered for so long. The letter's full contents have never been published. Its existence represents the most personally intimate connection between a Bond actor and a Bond vehicle in the franchise's entire history. And there you have it, 20 genuinely extraordinary secrets buried inside the most underrated car in Bond franchise history. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage was never simply a spy vehicle. It was a machine born from financial crisis, driven through -28-degree temperatures, and sent into the world carrying a hidden letter from the man who drove it. Share this with every Bond devotee and Aston Martin enthusiast you know.